The People's Republic of China, a bustling hub of global trade and innovation, home to the world's second largest GDP. Everything seems to point to a prosperous communist state. Except for the answer to one very important question: is China really a communist state? The short answer is, of course, no. China is not communist by really any means of the word, and in this video I'm going to give my view on why China is not what it claims to be through an analysis of its politics, history, and economics. To date, there hasn't yet been a communist country. Hold on, bear with me. I know what you're thinking. Even if I'm saying China isn't communist, what about the USSR, Vietnam, Cuba? And no, avid listener, I didn't forget about them or any of the others. I strongly believe that none of those are what can be considered communist. To defend my point, a good place to begin would be at the start. What exactly is communism? Well, that depends on who you ask. In risk of oversimplifying things, communism is a lot like ice cream. You can say you like ice cream, but there are many different flavors of ice cream out there. Instead of chocolate, vanilla, and cookies and cream, you have Stalinism, Trotskyism, Maoism, and Leninism, amongst others. People define them all in their own different ways, but they're all types of communism, and they all take after Marxism. Karl Marx, along with Friedrich Engels, who is quite often forgotten, co-authored the Communist Manifesto, a work that details how workers were being exploited by those who owned the means of production. It identified the two classes, the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, which nobody, including myself, probably ever pronounces right. The proletariat are the working class, and the bourgeoisie the owner class. The goal of this revolutionary new system was to limit worker exploitation and eliminate economic classes. Simply put, communism is a classless, moneyless, and stateless society. Let's focus on that third point, stateless. What does that mean? Well, a stateless society, as the name implies, is a society that is not governed by a state. What one of those looks like is another thing that's up for debate. But what isn't up for debate is what a stateless society doesn't look like. It doesn't look like a country where one individual holds power over all others, that is strictly authoritarian in nature and does not coexist with communism. No top-down society such as that could ever truly be considered a stateless or communist one. Let's apply that to China. The People's Republic of China doesn't hold direct elections on a national level. However, they do hold them locally, where people's congresses are elected. These people's congresses then elect governors, mayors, and other positions at this level. There is also a national version of this People's Congress, and they are responsible for voting for the president. This is a one-party system and clearly acts as a formality. When now President Xi Jinping was elected on the 14th of March 2013, he received 2,952 votes for and 1 vote against. How's that for a fair vote? So, while China does hold elections of individuals at the local level, the way the president is elected can clearly be seen as authoritarian. That, then, cuts out at least one of those. China, due to its authoritarian nature, cannot be considered stateless, and thus cannot be considered communist by this definition. China has been a great power throughout history. For much of its time, up until the 19th century that is, China was thought to be the world's largest economy. After a period of imperialism, war, famine, and more, China is once again on the road to reclaiming that title. It's currently second only to the United States of America in global GDP. The period in the middle of these two peaks of economic superiority is very important in our understanding of China's self-claimed communism. The man we're going to look at is, of course, Mao Zedong. Chairman Mao was the founder of what we still know of today as the People's Republic of China. The China of today, however, is drastically different to how it was under Mao. He was the founder of Maoism, a sect of communism based around China specifically, and General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party. Many herald him for his policies on housing, literacy, education, and women's rights. However, estimates of deaths under his rule range from 40 to 80 million victims. Many of these stem from the Cultural Revolution which he enacted towards the end of his reign from 1966 to his death in 1977. One editorial, the Peking Review, read, "Like the red sun rising in the east, the unprecedented great proletarian cultural revolution is illuminating the land with its brilliant rays." This cultural revolution was started by Mao in order to regain control over the Communist Party, which he thought was slipping away and following the road of capitalism. At this point, China had lost its close ties with the USSR in the Sino-Soviet split. They had too many differences in doctrine, with Mao having a specific aspiration to making China into his version of communism. The Red Guard was formed during this Cultural Revolution, a mass student-led movement which professed an absolute devotion to the teachings of Mao. This paramilitary movement would attack those who wore the clothes of the bourgeoisie and anyone who didn't follow the teachings of Mao. This Cultural Revolution, in an attempt to sculpt China into Mao's vision of a communist utopia, failed. The economy was crippled, famine swept through the lands. Factories and farms failed to stand out and produce higher rates of productivity in fear of being picked out as superior to others. Mediocrity was key, and innovations were stifled under fear of Mao's flawed version of communism. China stagnated. I'll just cut in here for a second. Keep in mind, this is a simplistic and broad overview on the topic, and won't do it the necessary justice. I encourage you to research further into this period of history yourself to learn more. Let's get back into it. How then did China recover into now being on track to become the world's largest economy by 2024? Many agree that was thanks to the work of Deng Xiaoping. Deng Xiaoping essentially took the reins after the death of Mao. While Xiaoping was never directly leader of China, he was the head of the Communist Party and oversaw the implementation of a lot of reforms throughout the country. Between the years of 1977 and 1979, industrial output increased by over 30%, which is a massive feat to accomplish. Deng Xiaoping had his sights set on the modernization of China and its recovery from the Cultural Revolution. While he was still considered a communist, he famously said, "It doesn't matter whether a cat is black or white, as long as it catches mice." This was said in reference to the Chinese economy. He didn't care whether or not it followed Maoist economic thought. All that mattered was whether or not it worked. And if it worked, it was good. Deng Xiaoping relaxed the power that party officials held on production, whether through factories or through farms. He let the managers of factories be responsible for their own inner workings and promoted excess production and effort as a good thing, as something that should be rewarded. But perhaps the biggest change he implemented was transforming China from a planned economy that focused inside with its domestic market to one that welcomed foreign trade, investment, and technology. This was a big deal for China, and we still clearly see the ramifications of that today. Many of our products are produced through Chinese labor, and for many nations, China is their largest trading partner. China was able to achieve its status as the world's largest economy in the past, not through much trade, but through its own farmland and its own labor. Deng Xiaoping recognized that to modernize and revitalize the country and bring economic reform, something had to change. This man took a different view to Mao Zedong's "all men are created equal." Instead, he said, "Poverty is not socialism. To be rich is glorious." This acted as a great symbolism for the new direction China was taking under Xiaoping's lead. Not one that adhered to Mao's communist ideologies, but one that embraced many of the teachings of capitalism. This was evident when the special economic zones were organized. 4 of these zones were created along the coast of China: Shenzhen, Shantou, Zhuhai, and Xiamen. What did these special economic zones mean? It meant people living in these areas were granted free market-oriented economic policies. They provided international businesses with incentives to invest in the development and infrastructure of the areas through reductions in tax and regulation. It allowed China to take advantage of foreign investments without completely changing the rest of the nation's economy. These zones were a hit. In 1986, an additional 14 cities were added to the list. Those that did business in these zones reaped the benefits. Many became rich, something mostly unseen and unheard of under Mao Zedong's ideologies. Those living in the zones benefited the most. The government profited as well, of course, with Communist Party officials receiving some of the best returns. To justify this, Deng Xiaoping said, "Let some people get wealthy first," on his plan to all becoming gloriously rich. Now in modern-day China, while the Communist Party still has just as much control over the economy, and it's still essentially centrally planned, there are 1,133 billionaires as of 2022. Remember the 3 principles of a communist government? Moneyless, classless, stateless. We've already crossed off stateless, and now with the appearance of billionaires, we can cross the others off as well. Just because the Chinese Communist Party has the word communist in its name doesn't mean that's what it is. The Nazis were officially referred to as the National Socialist Party, and let me tell you, they certainly weren't socialists. In truth, China is a mixed market economy. It combines government control with the private sector. Through this system, the country has achieved many impressive feats that shouldn't be ignored. As of 2016, China had reduced the amount of people living in extreme poverty by 745 million people compared to 30 years before. 70% of Chinese millennials are homeowners compared to the 49% in America. There are so many more positive statistics coming out of China that are often swept under the rug by American media. But we must also still talk about the human rights abuses that are coming out of China as well. To know what I'm talking about, you only have to see how the government dealt with the protesters in Hong Kong or the treatment of the Uyghur population. Believe it or not, America has the reverse problem. The good America does is broadcasted in the media, while the bad is swept under the rug. This isn't a video about which government is better, the USA or China battling it out for the top spot. But, with that being said, it is important to understand that neither of these governments are your friend. Each comes with their own very real, very disturbing issues. The problem? They're both driven by money and power, not by the people. Hating America doesn't mean you have to love China. Hating China doesn't mean you have to love America. There are other answers. Power only exists as a construct when it has the support of the people. Without the support of the people, there can be no power. One person has the ability to instigate a lot of change, but we're stronger when we're united. Many people throw communism and socialism in the same boat, then say it's been tried and it doesn't work. They point the finger at the USSR, at Cuba, at China. They say, look at those. Look at what communism has done to them. But let me tell you one thing. There has never been a communist government. You don't have to revere people like Stalin and Mao or support an authoritarian regime to have hope for a better future. This is one of my opinions of the world from Down Under. Unfortunately, there's only so much information I can include in a short YouTube video. If there's anything I missed out, let me know in the comments below so I can amend the record. It's important to formulate your own opinions through further research and inform yourself based on the information of multiple sources. But if you found this video helpful or informative, or you simply agree with my viewpoint, feel free to subscribe to the channel. Thank you.